Hi everyone, Heather Williams here with the California AfterSchool Network, and I'm joined by Michael Funk from the CDE Expanded Learning Division. And it's been a while, right, Michael? We've been
It
trying
has it
to
has
get
been a
the
minute.
schedule.
Yeah, it's been a while.
But we are officially here and back for another fireside chat, and a lot has been going on in the world of policy. And so, a lot of good updates for the expanded learning world. And so, we're jumping on to start to share those. And we won't get into the weeds of everything, but at least we'll be able to cover some of the major points that have come out in the last month or two. So, I'll jump.
Yes. Yeah,
Right.
but some of you might have thought the fire went out. It definitely hasn't gone out.
It
The
is.
fires are burning hot in Sacramento, and while we're going to talk primarily about the trailer bill, um, I need to at least acknowledge that the plan to uh, relocate the Department of Education underneath the governor's office is certainly one of the big headlines in California, and for us, for all of us, for me, um, we just don't have anything to share about that except what everyone can access in the papers and read. So there's no inside scoop to share with you on that, as much as we know it's going to be a year of transition and disruption. And um, transition and disruption does not always uh, mean bad things. We're committed to continue the work. The work of expanded learning is clearly lined out in Ed code, and those things haven't changed. And so the things that we talk about today are now the law, and they will be the law through this transition, and they will not shift. So with that, let's take it away, Heather.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, we'll jump straight in. So, federal updates. This will be a quick update, which is actually a nice thing. Last summer was a bit disruptive on the federal side, so we're all happy that it's a little more quiet and a little more smooth this year. So, just a quick reminder for the way the federal budget works. They run their fiscal years a little bit different from October 1st to September 30th. So we are currently in fiscal year 26, which ends at the end of September. But their budget forward funds are 21st century budget. So the fiscal year 26 funds California's fiscal year 26-27 budget for 21st century. We've shared this news out before, but if you recall, for this year, it was levelly funded at the $1.3 billion. However, due to the funding formula, it can still vary from year to year, even if we have level funding. And so this year we did see a slight shift. Um, we bumped California's allocation bumped up to 160 million instead of 157.7 million. So we'll take a few extra $1 million. That's great news. And I believe the GANs are being worked on by the department, so hopefully folks will see those in the near future. And then for the upcoming budget, so this is the federal fiscal year 27, which would fund 27, 28. So next year, that budget is still working its way through the process. As many of you probably already know, the president in his skinny budget proposed eliminating dedicated funding to 21st century. So far, that proposal has been rejected by Congress. And again, it's still making its way through Congress, but the relevant part of the relevant budget package in Congress has 21st century levelly funded. That's the current proposal. So we have a lot to assume that that is likely it'll move through the process at or close to that amount.
So Heather, again, is a grant award notification for those that don't know. And
Yep.
tell us why they call the president's budget skinny.
His budget is skinny because it is um, a very light touch budget. So it just has high level numbers and doesn't have a lot of the details. So a lot of times when it comes out, there's still a lot of questions about what does it even mean. And so it's similar to when in California the governor releases his budget proposal in January. It's just the start of the cycle, and there's a lot of conversations and negotiations that happen to get to the final budget.
And it doesn't matter who's president. Congress doesn't pay much attention to the president's skinny budget, just so you know.
Correct. Correct. Yes. Congress has pretty much ignored 21st century proposals from the presidents for quite a while now. So we lean into our advocacy with Congress when it comes to 21st century funding. All right, so fairly good news on the federal front. So we'll jump into the California cycle, the budget, the legislative updates. I'm not going to talk through all these things that are on the screen. This is just a reminder that there's a slightly different process for budget and then non-budget legislation, and those are in different colors. And so the legislature will be coming back next week, and they'll be finishing their legislative cycle out for the year in August. And so there are still bills that are moving through the legislature, but the budget process itself is largely complete, as a balanced budget needed to be passed and then signed into law by the end of June. And we do have that. So for this year, Assembly Bill 109 or AB 109 is the Budget Act for fiscal year 26-27. It was passed and signed into law on June 29th. And that includes kind of two high-level things that are important for expanded learning. The budget bill itself is really just the programs, line items, and the dollar amounts that are attached to them. So you won't see a lot of details if you were to click on this link and look at the budget bill. Uh, but this includes the entire state budget. And so for expanded learning, two key things to note. There's additional funding included in ELOP from last year, which is intended to stabilize Tier 2 rate. We'll talk more about that later. And then also it maintains the existing reimbursement rates for ACES and 21st century programs. So stable funding for ACES and 21st century. So great news for California. So what this looks like in total is $5.6 billion in expanded learning for funding in California. So that is great news. That's a little bit of a bump over last year. And this slide has a lot of things in small print. The important takeaway here is that year over year, we have seen expanded learning funding stay stable and or increase year to year. So when ELOP was announced back in, for fiscal year 21-22, the initial investment, 1.75 billion, there was a lot of questions of if ELOP would even be around in 2 or 3 years. Was that one-time funding? And as you can see, our state is really committed to this investment. And so it is increased up to 4.7 billion as of this year. Total $5.6 billion investment. So really great news for California.
Yeah,
Michael.
and if you're paying attention, there's other states that have been working hard to get some state money in their budget. Many of those states are celebrating this year. I don't know what the total number is at this point, but I've seen some figures through the After School Alliance. But those states are celebrating 25 million, 40 million, 50 million. But just to remind those that might be new to this, in 1996, the state amount of state money in California was zero. And in 1997, we had our first major victory and we got $50 million in the budget. And of course, $50 million in 97 is worth a lot more now, but it's still, that's where we started. And I think it's amazing to see that trajectory keep going up.
Yeah. So we're talking about a 30-year investment into expanded learning. So, yeah. All right, so continuing on with the budget bills, and this is just in case you see different numbers floating around and different summaries and whatnot. The budget process um, is rarely, probably never complete with the initial budget bill. There is inevitably modifications that need to be had as things get fine-tuned, and that is the case this year as well. So there are things called budget bill juniors, and so these will pass and make minor adjustments. The intent of the budget stays the same, but there's some minor adjustments that are made. And so in the budget bill junior SB 111, which was also approved on June 29th, you'll see an increase in ELOP from 4.669 billion to 4.672 billion, and that reflects a total of a $66 million increase, which is the total amount that was needed to cover the cost to increase the tier two rates from last year. So there's other budget bills that have been passed, but with no real impact on education. So that's the primary one. And if you're looking for the most current numbers on the budget, they will live in that budget bill. There's also trailer bills. And so a lot of times, when a budget is proposed and adopted, there are things that need to change in existing law to implement the budget, and so those get packaged separately in a budget trailer bill. Those don't necessarily have the same time requirements, but do end up passing shortly after the budget, and they're organized in these big buckets, issue areas, i.e. K-12, higher education, etc. And so for education this year, AB 126 is the main budget trailer bill. And that was passed and then signed onto law on July 9th. So, again, shortly after the budget bill. And that outlines the details of some changes to expanded learning. And we'll go into more depth in these in just a moment. But for ELOP, that includes the specifics around setting tier two rates at no less than 1,800. Um, Increasing ELOP TA dollars for county offices from 5 million to 7.5 million, and includes the requirement that they coordinate with the community schools STAC activities, and STAC stands for Statewide Technical Assistance Center, I believe.
Statewide Transformative
Thank you.
Assistance Center.
Almost had it.
Close enough.
Um, And then for ACEs in 21st century, it prioritizes school sites that are not receiving ELOP funding, and also school sites receiving the Community Schools Partnership Act funds. It prohibits ACEs in 21st century funding from supplanting funding for ELOP. And then for ACEs, there's some language around LEA audits, and we'll now get into what all of these things mean. So I'll just start with first the ELOP tier two rates. And so this is the actual language that was in the trailer bill. And it says in here, right, the section of Ed Code that's to be amended or has been amended. And this is the section of Ed Code that talks about the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, or ELOP. And there's various paragraphs that talk about setting the rates. This is a new paragraph. And if you're just reading this, it can be a little challenging to understand what all these words mean. We talk a lot about tier one and tier two rates, or tier one, tier two LEAs. That's not official language, that's in Ed Code. It's just a simplified way to talk about what is in Ed Code. And so in here you have paragraphs that refer to other paragraphs and subparagraphs. But basically, the summary of all of this language is that starting in fiscal year 26-27, our current fiscal year, the tier two rate shall not be less than $1,800 or more than $2,750, which is the tier one rate. And this is a chart that kind of explains more about the rates, the calculations, the requirements of the two different rates. And as you can see on the one side, rate one has been set at $2,750 since 22-23 fiscal year. And so that's been stable for quite some time. Rate two has fluctuated because of the nature of the funding, right? We get a budget allocation. They calculate how how much funding is needed to cover rate one, and then whatever's left split up for rate two. And that, as you can see in this chart, has fluctuated quite a bit. And so a lot of conversations about how we stabilize that rate for those districts so that they can actually plan for these programs. And what that's resulted in, starting in this year, is a minimum rate of $1,800. And CDE has already posted the preliminary rate. And so if you click on this deck, you can click on the fiscal year 26-27 rates. You can see that officially up on the CDE website. Michael, anything?
Yeah, this is significant. This is big news. There's lots of changes in trader bill, but this could be the most consequential for LEAs and their stability. I think the legislature and the administration have been talking about how to stabilize rate two. Have they been talking about that? So in case you don't understand, the way it works is there's a budget allocation for how much money is for ELOP. Every district that qualifies as tier one, 55% unduplicated and above, there's a formula and they're awarded $2,750 per student. Then tier two gets what's left over. And you can see on that right-hand column, uh, first year of ELOP, it was $1,800. Then it went to 1575, 79, then 1280. So it's really good news for LEAs that are tier two that they can now plan with confidence what their money's going to be. And so now what happens is, so why did the legislature put in $2 more million for ELOP in the budget bill junior? Well, it's because during the course of from year to year, there might be more LEAs that move into tier one. So it's going to take more money to fund tier one at 2,750 and tier two at $1,800. And so this year they just had to add 2 more million to make that happen. So that's what's going on uh, as they make the sausage, as they say.
And I think this is really important just to identify that because the rates are now set in education code, moving forward in the budget process, this is a question we've seen come up, but it's not necessarily that the legislature is going to start with the $4.7 billion number. They would start with, these are the two rates, checking in with the department. What is the amount of funding that you need to fund districts at these two rates in the coming year? And that would actually set the budget moving forward. These rates, of course, could be adjusted as they have been through legislation, through future trailer bills. But once something is set as a minimum in education code, it's a lot harder to change that because that's now set as an expectation for the minimum moving forward. So this is great news for our districts to really establish those rates moving forward. All right. Keep us moving. I'm going to jump into this next slide and turn it over to Michael. And this is really where we start talking about expanded learning and community schools.
So there is a system of support for expanded learning, which is comprised of staff from the expanded learning division and 16 county offices of education that are funded by the division in the 11 county superintendent regions. In other words, some regions have more than one county. They've chosen to have more than one county funded. Doesn't mean that region gets more money. It means it's dispersed more through the county. And in short, just recognizing the amount of work and the amount of support, the legislature put $2.5 million more into the system, and it's targeted towards those county offices that are currently funded in the system of support. I'm not going to get into the weeds of this. It actually means more money for all parts of the system of support, um, state ops for EXLD, more money for the county offices, and more money for the statewide contractors, the California AfterSchool Network and ASAP Connect. So it's a recognition that there needed to be more funding to support the work. And more importantly, this bold statement that talks about um, the county offices will now, by law, be required to collaborate and work with the statewide State Transformation Assistance Center. In other words, the Community School System of Support. They call it the STAC, Statewide Transformative Assistance Center, and the RTACs, which is the regional. So we're figuring that out. It's great news, but I think what everyone needs to be thinking about is coherence between community schools and expanded learning. And we've done academies on that. We probably could do a whole fireside chat on that. We probably should, Heather. I can't take more time to go into it today, but except to say that when I think about what that means, it means that expanded learning, it's not like this program's not going to work with that program. Expanded learning in its essence is thinking about how we work with children and what they need. It's how children are seen, known, supported, they're met where they're at. That's high quality expanded learning, regardless of what the activities are. And it's the same for community schools. So it's a great opportunity to be working together. Uh, Please, if you're not talking to the person in your district or a person in your county office that's working with community schools, please make that happen. Okay, now we're going to pick up the pace just a bit because the next several slides are things that we understand, but are also things that we are now in the process of working with our legal division at CDE to make sure we understand the impact of what these things mean in a request for funding, RFA. What I can tell you is, again, based on the desire to have more coherence between community schools and expanded learning, this change to ACES funding applies to new applicants only. If you have an existing ACES grant, this does not pertain to you. This is for when we put out an RFA for new sites to be funded, um, then this requirement needs to be met. And basically, we will prioritize, in addition to free and reduced price lunch, we will be prioritizing schools uh, that are are not provided with expanded learning opportunities funding and that are the recipient of community schools funding. What's the intent? Increase coordination with community schools. And obviously, if you are prioritizing schools that do not receive ELOP, you're going to, by definition, incentivize more funding for seventh through ninth grade. Middle schoolers, how does the impact ACES renewals? It's not. And as we said, I'm still working with legal. We are working with legal on what this looks like in the RFA. So I think we'll just hold it at that. Same similar intent for the 21st century. This is a lot of text, really small and tiny. I think the next slide has it a little bit more readable. So 84.8 letter E. What you need to know is the letters before that talk about 50% of 21st century money goes to high schools. 5% is held back for equitable access. 5% is for local assistance TA that funds the statewide system of support in addition to the ELOP money. E was all about 40% for elementary middle. Now it says up to 40%. And it also prioritizes sites that receive community school funding and Priority shall be given to grant applications that will provide expanded learning to school sites not receiving expanded learning funding. Same thing as ACEs. It's worded slightly different. And the up to 40 means we can still fund elementary, middle schools that don't receive community school funding because it says up to 40%. So a lot's to work out on this, but end of the day, bottom line is both new funding for ACEs and 21st century will in some form or fashion emphasize schools that receive community school funding and do not receive ELOP.
Right. So now we have supplanting.
There's a section like this in ACEs. It's word for word also in 21st century. And I'll let you just read that paragraph to help you fall asleep at night. Um, what it's really saying is if you have ELOP funding and you apply for ACEs or 21st century and get it, then you have to do more than you were doing before. That's the layman's way of saying what that paragraph says. So you have to serve more kids, or you have to do something with higher quality, or you have to in some way enhance the program, more field trips. It lists serving additional exist program offerings, enhancing program quality. And the word or in there is significant because you don't have to do all of those things. You got to do something to make it better. That's in essence what it's saying. You want to expand on it at all, Heather?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple words on that. And this is where sometimes reading ed code is challenging or any sort of legal writing. Again, it's a lot of words and you might miss something small like the or, but it's highlighted, bolded here because that that's a very important word that's in here. Also including but not limited to. So these are the types of things you might do to exceed the minimum requirements, but there might be other things as well, right? And so this is just giving a little bit of language, again, as Michael said, to indicate that in some sort of way, if you get more money, more funding, you should be offering more things to your students. And you could make this really complicated, right? There's questions about how does this impact one comprehensive program? Does that mean now we can't run that? And no, you should most definitely continue to run one comprehensive program with your funding sources. It's really about how do you strengthen those programs if you have additional dollars. And so maybe you're running ELOP and you are offering, to hit your 9-hour day, you've been offering 3 hours after school, but you know your family wants time before school, right? And so maybe now you look at how do you leverage funding to extend your day even longer, or you're serving seventh grade students, or you've really wanted to bring in this cool vendor to offer this awesome like coding and robotics activity, but you just haven't had the budget. Now you have the budget, new literacy initiative, right? The options are pretty much endless, but really you get more money, you have to do more things. So I think that's the key takeaway here. And 21st century has the same language. So it means the same thing for 21st century. If you have ELOP and you get 21st century, you need to do more than what you were doing with just ELOP. All right, and this is our last slide, Michael.
A little bit anticlimactic because I'm not even going to talk about this. This doesn't really apply to a great extent. It's the Audits and Investigation Division that has to pay attention to this and work with this, and I'll be meeting with them soon. Uh, we wanted to bring it up because if you're one of those persons that scours ACES Ed Code to see what's changed, you're going to see this amendment. You're going to wonder what's that all about. And end of the day, for LEAs, it means nothing. It has something to do with how we at the State Department process audits and work with audits. And we'll be working with another division with that.
All right. Well, those are our slides for today. And there's other things that happened in the budget and the trailer bill. Michael, you already talked a little bit about the governance reform. There's a lot around community schools, a lot of investment into transitioning that to an ongoing funding source, a lot of wins in education that are very exciting and um as Michael said, we definitely need another fireside chat so we can get into the more of the weeds on those. There's some other pieces of legislation moving that may or may not impact expanded learning. We've been tracking those, but there's still at least another month or so before we know if they'll pass and or be signed by the governor. So there's definitely more to come, but these are the major kind of pieces that were impacted by the budget and the trailer bill.
Right, because legislatures in recess, they'll come back and, all the legislation we've been talking about is budget legislation. That's different than bills that individual lawmakers bring to committee and to the floor to pass a certain issue. All that's yet to come. So there's more to come. So, hey, Taylor, thank you. Great job on that slide deck, and just encourage you to, in our EXLD office hours, we covered all this in great detail last Friday. We'll, if you have more questions, reach out to your system of support people, reach out to come to office hours. We are here to help you unpack it. And you'll have that slide deck available to you that you can share with others and look at it yourself. Um, Heather, I think I want to close by saying all the detail is important. It represents a lot of opportunities we haven't had before. When I look at this budget, I see even more stability for future funding for ELOP. It's in the law now with both the rates. I think we just stand on more solid ground than we've been standing on in a long time. Yet I still, when I'm talking to people, still hear people talking about we're going to use our extended learning program to help kids read better or improve math scores or attendance recovery. And all those are amazing things. But I would say to you, yes, and your students should say, this is a place I belong. This is a place I'm cared for. This is a place where I receive guidance in life. And this is a place where others can come, regardless of what they look like. And um, these people know what I need and they meet me where I'm at. That's leading with love. And all this stuff matters, all the details matter. Don't lose sight of what the real purpose is. So thank you, Heather. And we'll try to get back to you folks with another fireside chat a lot sooner.
Thank you, Michael.